Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles. There are 4 articles relevant for both prelims and mains which require a detailed analysis, and we have 3 small articles that are important only for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. And also ensure that you join our official Telegram channel. The link is provided in the video description, because after the session ends, we provide a quiz on these articles that we are going to discuss in the session. This is the best way for you to revise these articles as well. With this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at this editorial from page number 6. This editorial talks about the elections that have been recently announced to the Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir and Haryana. Recently, you might have read in papers that the Election Commission of India has announced the election schedule for 2 important assembly elections, one for the state of Haryana, the other for the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So let's examine why these elections are very significant. Now, with regard to Haryana, the elections that have been announced, they are largely significant from a political point of view, because in Haryana, schemes like Agniveer with regard to recruitment to the armed forces has been very controversial. In states like Haryana, where joblessness remains very high, the youth have relied on the military for the sake of employment. So controversial schemes like the Agnipath, it has had a political impact, and also there has been a strong anti-incumbency factor that has built up against the ruling BJP. So politically, the elections in Haryana can be very significant, but that is not the focus for our exams. With regard to our examination, the focus would be the elections that have been announced for the Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. This topic deserves a detailed examination, and we need to understand why the announcement of elections for J&K Assembly is so significant. So let's quickly look at the politics of J&K of the last decade and understand the significance of the upcoming elections. Because on these lines, you can expect a mains question. The impact of the recently announced elections on the stability of J&K, the security situation in J&K, can be a very important question in our mains examination. So let's begin this discussion and let's focus on Jammu and Kashmir and its politics of the last decade. See, it's been 10 years plus since J&K witnessed state elections or assembly elections. The last assembly election in Jammu and Kashmir was held in the year 2014, that is nearly 10 years ago, a decade ago. In this election, there was no clear majority. In Jammu and Kashmir, the 2 major regional parties are the PDP, the People's Democratic Party, and the National Conference, the NC. The NC is largely dominated by the Abdullah family, Sheikh Abdullah and his son Omar Abdullah, and the PDP was then dominated by Mufti Muhammad Syed, a tall leader from J&K who passed away later as well, and his daughter. Right? So essentially, dynastic politics have ruled the roost in J&K, also leading to a lot of unpopularity against these parties. So in the 2014 state assembly elections, because remember, Jammu and Kashmir back then was still a full-fledged state. So in these state assembly elections, the PDP emerged as the single largest party, with the National Conference winning around 15 seats, and the BJP also managed to secure a significant number of seats. So this led to a coalition government in Jammu and Kashmir where the PDP aligned with the BJP. The PDP and the BJP, which is a national party, formed an alliance, formed a coalition government under the leadership of Mufti Muhammad Syed. Now, holding such elections periodically, it is the hallmark of a democracy. that too at the state level. It helps in protecting the federal nature of our polity. It helps in allowing the people to express their democratic views, their choices, and thus it's a very important expression of democracy itself. So holding such periodic elections once in 5 years as mandated by the Constitution, it essentially shows the functioning nature of democracy at the grassroots. So this has not happened in J&K since 2014. This was the last election when the coalition government was formed between PDP and the BJP. And this government as well did not last for a long time. For many years, it has been alleged that democracy has been curtailed in Jammu and Kashmir. That is why the topic becomes very important. Within few years after forming the coalition government, the BJP withdrew its support, leading to the collapse of the state government. Eventually, the state assembly was dissolved by the governor and president's rule was also imposed under the provisions of Article 356. So essentially, J&K came under the rule of the centre in 2018, and since then it has remained under the rule of the centre. So for 6 years, Jammu and Kashmir has been directly ruled, administered by the centre with no state government or no assembly being elected by the people. So it's been more than 6 years since such a state government or a assembly level government was elected at the level of Jammu and Kashmir. So following the imposition of president's rule under Article 356, the centre took over the administration of J&K. And the very next year, the Modi government carried out a major change as far as the very structure of Jammu and Kashmir was concerned. On August 5th, 2019, nearly 5 years ago, the special status of J&K under Article 370 was revoked by abrogating Article 370. With this, the separate constitution of J&K was withdrawn, its separate flag was dismantled, and the special status which was enjoyed by the state, by the assembly, the government, came to an end in 2019. This was followed by the reorganization of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. For the first time ever in independent India, a full-fledged state was being broken down into 2 union territories. This was essentially seen as a demotion. A state was now being reconstituted into 2 union territories, that is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. This reorganization act provided for an elected assembly to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Essentially, the status of J&K became similar to that of Delhi and Puducherry, which are also union territories with their own elected assemblies and an elected government. So a similar setup was provided for Jammu and Kashmir following the reorganization, but this promised election was never conducted in the last 5 years. So essentially, the last assembly election that happened in J&K was in 2014, a decade ago. Even that government did not last. The centre had imposed president's rule, and for the last 6 years, J&K has been under the direct rule of the centre. So this in many ways erodes federalism. It erodes the confidence of the people in the constitution, in the democratic process itself. And that too in a sensitive region like Jammu and Kashmir, where we face a serious security challenge. We are not only threatened here by the local separatist movements, particularly around the Kashmir region, but we face a much significant threat from the cross-border terrorism that Pakistan exports to India. From across the line of control, Pakistan is actively involved in breeding and sponsoring terrorism against India. And recently we have seen an uptick or an upsurge in incidents of militancy and terrorism in the Jammu region as well, leading to the destabilization of Jammu and Kashmir. So in this context, the decision to hold elections and the announcement of the schedule is extremely important. So after J&K was downgraded to a union territory with an elected assembly, in order to pave the way for holding elections, a delimitation exercise was necessary. A delimitation commission was set up for this purpose, which submitted its report in 2022, a couple of years ago. A delimitation commission essentially redraws the boundaries of the constituencies. and accordingly J&K's constituencies were redrawn. Prior to the delimitation, Jammu and Kashmir together, that is the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir, they had a total number of 83 assembly seats. Is that clear? If you look at the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, if you take out the Ladakh region and the Pakistan occupied Kashmir region, the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir collectively had around 83 seats. Now with delimitation, this number has jumped to a total of 90 seats. 6 new seats have been added in the Jammu division. 1 new seat was added in the Kashmir division. So essentially, the representation for Jammu has gone up in the assembly, and for Kashmir also it has gone up. But if you look at the vote percentage, if you look at the total ACs that comes up in this region, Kashmir's representation has slightly dropped from around 55% to 52% in the state assembly. And if you look at the Jammu region, its representation in the assembly has gone up from around 44% to around 47-48%. So this brings more parity between the Jammu and Kashmir regions, and also 24 assembly seats have been assigned nominally for POK, for Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now this is always a symbolic gesture from India, which essentially allows India to substantiate its claims on these illegally occupied territories in Kashmir. This is the right position of India as well, as Pakistan remains in illegal occupation of Gilgit-Baltistan and the other parts of J&K, which is legitimately claimed by India, given that back in 1947-48, Raja Hari Singh, the then monarch of J&K, signed an instrument of accession with India, thus merging and integrating the entire princely state of J&K as it existed in 1947 with the Indian Union. So ever since Pakistan has occupied these territories illegally, India refers to this region as Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and we even assign nominal seats in the assembly. So 24 seats are assigned for the POK region, 43 seats for Jammu, 47 for Kashmir. So this is the current representation in the Jammu and Kashmir assembly where the elections are slated to be held. And parallelly, there were petitions filed at the Supreme Court against the constitutionality of the changes that were done to J&K by abrogating Article 370 and by reorganizing the state. So after several years of hearing, the Supreme Court recently, just last year, December 2023, it upheld the constitutional validity of the abrogation of Article 370. The Supreme Court ruled that the actions of the government of India to revoke the special status of J&K by abrogating Article 370 was perfectly constitutional. So thus, it has made the abrogation of Article 370 permanent, and it upheld the reorganization as well, which is always a constitutional right of the Parliament. But the Supreme Court mandated the Election Commission and ordered the government of India to ensure that the elections to the Assembly of J&K is held before September 2024. Essentially, the Supreme Court gave a deadline because for 6 years J&K was under the rule of the centre. It had been a decade since elections were held in J&K. So concerns were growing that it was eroding democracy. It was leading to unitary rule by the centre. It was essentially cutting down the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So criticism was growing against the Modi government for derailing democracy and for taking away the rights of the people, the political rights of the people. Because when Article 370 was revoked, it was done under very controversial circumstances. For example, basic rights were suspended. Right to movement, right to freedom of speech and expression, right to communication, right to assembly under Article 19. These rights were curbed temporarily. Internet was suspended for prolonged periods of time. Political leaders were placed under house arrest. Movement was curbed. So these actions of the government was called into question. It was labelled as unitary actions and authoritarian actions, which was an erosion of democracy at the grassroots level. So calls were growing to restore assembly elections and bring back the festival of democracy to J&K, which will help in fulfilling the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So the Supreme Court which was looking at the constitutionality of all these changes, upheld the constitutionality, but it ordered the Election Commission and the government to ensure that assembly elections as promised will be conducted within the given deadline of September 2024. So it's in line with this order of the Supreme Court that the Election Commission has announced the schedule of elections for J&K. Until June, Election Commission was busy with the national elections, the general elections of 2024, and once that has been concluded, it has come out with a schedule for J&K and Haryana. In fact, there are other states as well going for elections like Maharashtra, Jharkhand, but the Election Commission has decided to split these elections into distinct stages, because holding elections in J&K is not an easy task. Given the security situation and given the arrangements that are required to secure and hold a free and fair election in J&K, the Election Commission would like to keep its entire focus and concentration on just Jammu and Kashmir. So that's why it has slightly deferred the elections to Maharashtra and Jharkhand, and it has announced the election schedule only for J&K and the state of Haryana. So this is a very positive development to come out of Jammu and Kashmir and from Delhi, because in the recent general elections, there has been a very positive signal that has come out from Jammu and Kashmir. If you look at the voters' participation, it has been at a record level. According to Election Commission data, the voter turnout in J&K overall was more than 58%. Now you might think 58% voter turnout is very low when compared to the national average. Correct. It is relatively low compared to the national average. But don't forget that in J&K, because of the persistence of feelings of separatism and the wide prevalence of extremism and how insurgents have targeted elections as well, getting such a big turnout is indeed a very significant development, because there have been cases where the turnout has been in single digits. If you look at local elections to the panchayats, where sarpanchs and the panchayat leaders would be targeted by the militants, the voter turnout has been drastically low historically in Jammu and Kashmir. And the militants would even target those who would go out and vote in the elections, because elections represent democracy. It represents the Indian constitution on the ground. It essentially defeats and counters the very propaganda of these extremists. So extremism has been a key factor in J&K. The local separatism, the presence of insurgency and terrorism with support from across the border has been a direct threat to Indian democracy and the conduct of elections in J&K. So to get the highest voter turnout in 4 decades, it was indeed a very big significant development during the recent general elections, during the Lok Sabha elections. Just in Kashmir Valley, the turnout was more than 50%, close to 51%, which is quite significant. It means that people are ready to embrace democracy. At the grassroots, there is a change which is being witnessed, where people are showing more faith in the Constitution of India, in the democracy of India, and in the electoral process. So this is the right time to conduct elections as promised and as per the deadline given by the Supreme Court. So accordingly, Election Commission has come out and announced the election schedule, and that is what makes this development so significant. Now what remains to be done is to restore complete statehood to the Union Territory of J&K. This has been another standing demand. Ever since the reorganization of J&K, there has been criticism of the Modi government that a state was essentially demoted to a Union Territory. This affected the rights of the people, and essentially it affected the very image of Jammu and Kashmir as well. So restoring this political right of restoring statehood has been a long-standing demand, and the government has shown inclination towards this. Prime Minister Modi also has indicated that statehood might be restored in the coming days, and Union Home Minister Amit Shah also has committed recently that after the elections to the Legislative Assembly, statehood might be restored by the central government. This is what makes the development all the more significant. And another reason why the elections are important is because we have seen a sudden rise in terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. In the last 1.5 to 2 years, I would say in the last 15 to 18 months, there has been a big spike in terror incidents, not just in Kashmir but also in Jammu. And there is a very disturbing pattern which is developing. That is why holding elections as soon as possible and even restoring statehood to have a functional state government is extremely essential. Because at the end of the day, public order, law and order, policing is a state subject. You can't have the center ruling over the region forever, right? In a way, it defeats the aspirations of the people as well. If you look at the Kashmir region, militants have been resorting to targeted attacks. There has been an increase in targeted attacks against outsiders, essentially migrant workers, after the special status of J&K was revoked. And religious minorities also have been targeted by militants. So in the Kashmir region in particular, there have been targeted terrorist attacks against migrant workers from UP and Bihar. Because previously when J&K had special status, under Article 35A, outsiders had very limited rights and privileges in Jammu and Kashmir. Only those who are domiciled in J&K, they enjoyed special privileges including the right to vote, the right to buy property, and the right to enjoy government benefits like reservations, subsidies, etc. With the removal of special status, Article 35A is gone, and Indians, right, they will all enjoy the same rights in J&K going forward. So this has led the militant groups to specifically target migrant workers who have settled in J&K, particularly workers from UP and Bihar have been subjected to targeted attacks by the terrorists. There has been an increase, a spike in targeted attacks against religious minorities in particular, against minority Hindus in particular. And another disturbing trend is the revival of militancy terrorism in the Jammu division. Generally in the last 15-20 years, the trend has been that terrorism has largely been concentrated in the Kashmir division, from Srinagar to Baramulla to Anantnag to Kupwara. These have been the hotspots of militancy in J&K. In the 80s and 90s, even Jammu region was badly affected by terrorism, be it the Poonch Rajouri division or even the Riyasi district. So all these areas of the Jammu region, they were affected by terrorism back in the 1990s. That was the peak of militancy in the Jammu region. But this had been curbed through security operations. In the 90s and early 2000s, Indian Army conducted major operations like Operation Sarpa Vinash, through which we decimated the terror network, and we also implemented the village defense committees or VDCs, where locals were armed by the security forces, allowing them to target the militants. This was a self-defense initiative to help the local villages protect themselves against the terrorists. These initiatives of the 90s had curbed militancy, taken away the local support, and Indian Army and other security forces had curbed insurgency and terrorism in Jammu region. But after 15-20 years, we are seeing a revival of terrorism in the Jammu region. This is part of a deliberate strategy on the part of the terrorists with backing from Pakistan. There is a clear involvement of Pakistani agencies like ISI and its army in carrying out a shift in the trend in terrorism. So Kashmir is not just the focus right now. Jammu has seen a major spurt in terror attacks, where frequent attacks have been carried out against the Indian Army and even against religious minorities in the Jammu division. So given the spike in terrorism, it's all the more important to conclude the elections and maybe restore statehood as soon as possible to ensure that we have a fully functional state government which can look after the public order, law and order situation, and improve policing and deal with counterinsurgency with help from the central government. This is extremely essential to not just fulfill the aspirations and political rights of the people of J&K, but it's very essential to stabilize the region and bring a security stability as well in Jammu and Kashmir. That is why the elections that have been announced is very, very crucial. So let's look at a practice question. Evaluate the significance of conducting assembly elections in J&K after a decade of uncertainty. For such a question, you can start your answer by explaining the role, the significance of conducting periodic elections. One small paragraph about why periodic elections are the hallmark of a democracy, a functional democracy. This is how people can express their right. This is how people can essentially cast their political choice and hold the government accountable. They can ensure that the government will fulfill their basic demands and rights. So give a small explanation on the role and significance of conducting periodic elections which is a hallmark of democracy, and point out that this has not happened in J&K from 2014. From one decade, J&K has not seen elections. So basically you are conveying to the evaluator what is the impact of not conducting elections. In the body you can illustrate this further. You can elaborate why elections have not happened, a brief explanation on what has happened in the last decade, a coalition government, followed by President's rule under Article 356, and the changes related to Article 370, the abrogation of special status, the reorganization of the state into union territories. Right, so this presents the context, the recent events, and then point out how the Supreme Court set a deadline, how Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the changes, but it ordered the Election Commission and the government to ensure elections are held before September 2024. So accordingly, Election Commission is holding the elections, but the significance here is that, one, voter turnout has gone up, which is a very positive development in the recent general elections. You can mention that, right? You can talk about the delimitation which has been done, how a more fair representation has been given for Jammu region in the assembly, how people are craving for increased political representation, and also talk about the security situation, the rise in terrorism, which also demands the conduct of elections so that we can have an elected responsible state government, right? So you need to push for restoration of statehood and explain how these two developments can be significant for internal security in India and the stability of Jammu and Kashmir, and that will complete your answer. So going forward, let's look at another important editorial, again related to elections which are coming up, but this time outside of India, in our neighboring country Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is headed towards elections, and this is very significant as far as India is concerned. As you know, Sri Lanka is an Indian Ocean country, it's an island nation, and it occupies a critical position in the Indian Ocean. So from India's point of view, Sri Lanka is a key partner, strategic partner. So ensuring that we have a friendly government in Sri Lanka is extremely important, especially given the challenges that Sri Lanka has gone through. Historically, it has suffered from the ethnic conflict between the Sinhala Buddhist majority and the Tamil minorities, right? The civil war, of course, ended in 2009, but still in the northern province and in the eastern province here, where you find the Tamil minority to be concentrated, there are several developmental challenges. The war that lasted for more than 3 decades, from 1980s to early 2000, has destroyed the northern and eastern provinces. It has been deprived of development. There are allegations that Sri Lankan government has discriminated against northern and eastern provinces. So securing the full rights to the Tamil minorities is a key objective for India. Apart from that, Sri Lanka has recently gone through a major economic crisis in 2022. It has been India which has stepped up to help the Sri Lankan government to bring some economic stability back. So given these challenging circumstances, the conduct of presidential elections, which is coming up in few weeks, is going to be very significant, and India will closely watch these elections. Because you all know what's happening across our neighborhood. Everywhere you look around India, there is instability, from Pakistan to Myanmar to Bangladesh, even Nepal. So we can't afford another such situation in Sri Lanka. It's extremely important because Sri Lanka has just seen a massive economic crisis. And given the competition that you see here, a strategic competition between India and China, how both India and China have competed for influence in the Indian Ocean, particularly in Sri Lanka. They have competed for strategic projects, key projects at Colombo port, for example. India and China were in competition, right? So China already has a significant presence in Sri Lanka through its Belt and Road Initiative. When the Rajapaksa brothers were in power, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the leader from 2005 to 2015 for a decade, then his brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa was in power from 2019 to 2022. During these years, Sri Lanka was largely seen as pro-China. Under the Rajapaksa government, Sri Lanka was largely seen as pro-China, favouring China in key strategic projects. And this enhanced China's diplomatic and even military influence, not just in Sri Lanka but across the Indian Ocean. Now this has been perceived as a direct threat by India. India would like to counter that Chinese influence, get hold of key strategic projects. So China has developed key ports like Hambantota and the Matala airport in southern Sri Lanka. It has developed the Colombo port, and it even won the project to develop East Container Terminal at Colombo, which earlier had been awarded to India and Japan. The project was snatched away from India and Japan and given to China by Gotabaya Rajapaksa a few years ago. But India has been countering the Chinese influence, and the economic crisis has helped India to gain back influence in the country. See, India has a doctrine towards the Indian Ocean called the Sagar Doctrine, security and growth for all in the region. India guarantees maritime security, economic security and growth for all countries across the Indian Ocean. India wants to be seen as the net security provider. We basically want to be the first responder to help any small country in the Indian Ocean whenever they face a crisis. Be it a natural disaster, be it an economic crisis or a political crisis or a security situation. India would like to be the first responder to guarantee security to these countries. That is how India can protect its traditional sphere of influence in the Indian Ocean and counter external powers like China. So given these stakes, the elections coming up in Sri Lanka are very crucial from India's point of view. Is that clear? If you look at the last 2 years, Sri Lanka has suffered enormously because of the economic crisis. This crisis was largely due to economic mismanagement, especially by the Rajapaksa brothers. Under the Rajapaksa brothers, Sri Lanka took heavy debt, foreign loans from China, Japan, India, and also from the international markets, from the IMF. Sri Lanka had borrowed heavily. It fell into a debt burden. It could not repay the debt. Plus, events which disrupted the economy, like COVID-19, for example, it severely hit Sri Lanka's big source of revenue, which is tourism. The Easter Sunday bombings carried out by Islamic State, a local affiliate of the ISIS called NTJ, National Tawhid Jamaat, a Sri Lankan based terrorist organization which is aligned with ISIS, carried out a major terror attack in 2019 called Easter Sunday bombings that also affected Sri Lanka's security situation and affected the flow of tourists. Plus the Russia-Ukraine war, it disrupted global supply chains again. Just when the global economy was recovering, the Ukraine war disrupted the supply chains, increased commodity prices, pushing countries like Sri Lanka into a deep economic crisis. Forex reserves had depleted. Inflation hit record levels because Sri Lanka didn't have enough forex reserves to continue essential imports. This was pure economic mismanagement by the Rajapaksa government and the other Sri Lankan governments in the last 15-20 years. The debt burden was the primary cause, plus overall poor economic policies. Governments had splurged on unnecessary projects. They had tried populist schemes to win votes. They had even come out with irrational policies like overnight switch to organic farming. Sri Lanka imposed a ban on use of fertilizers because the import of fertilizers was a huge burden, and overnight the Rajapaksa brothers who were in power, they banned the usage of fertilizers, forcing the farmers to switch to natural organic farming. This destroyed agricultural productivity and hurt Sri Lanka's critical export, which is spices and tea. Tea and spices and other plantation crops, rubber, etc. They are the critical exports of Sri Lanka. So essentially all the revenue generating sources were hit. Export of spices, tea, rubber was hit, and tourism revenue took a massive hit, and the prices of commodities went up, plus the debt burden kept piling up, and this was a cocktail which basically exploded, that destroyed the Sri Lankan economy a couple of years ago. Now to come out of this crisis, Sri Lanka got a new government. Rajapaksa brothers were thrown out of power. The people rebelled against the Rajapaksa family. They ran away from the country as well, and an interim government had been formed, and in the last 2 years, this unity government under the current president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has done an incredible job of stabilizing the Sri Lankan economy. They've tried bringing it back on track. And India has played a very big role in this stabilization. India alone has given $4 billion worth of assistance. We have increased the line of credit, which are concessional loans that India provides to small countries like Sri Lanka. We deferred the repayment of certain loans We dispatched relief and aid material to help the Sri Lankan people overcome the crisis so that they at least have essential products like fuel, food, etc. India has worked out a currency swap arrangement. India's RBI and the Sri Lankan Central Bank have a currency swap arrangement. We deferred the repayment of several pending loans, giving a breathing space for Sri Lanka. We have worked with other creditors like Japan and the Paris Club of Creditors, which is a group of creditor nations that gives out loans to the debtor nations or the borrowing nations. So they can work together, the Paris Club of Creditors, they work together to restructure the loans, to defer the repayment, reduce the interest rate and give fresh extensions so that the loan itself is restructured, which will reduce the burden, the debt burden on the country. So India has played a pivotal role in this. We have worked with Japan and the Paris Club of Creditors to ensure that the loans were restructured so that Sri Lanka becomes eligible for a bailout package from the IMF, from the International Monetary Fund. So Sri Lanka has received an extended fund facility or EFF, extended fund facility from the IMF amounting to nearly $3 to $4 billion with further extensions coming up. And this is currently helping Sri Lanka to bounce back and revive its economy. So credit should be given to Ranil Wickremesinghe, his current incumbent government, and hence the upcoming elections are all the more important because there are several parties contesting. Ranil Wickremesinghe is moving out of his traditional party, the UNP, and he is contesting as an independent candidate. Then Rajpaksa brothers, if they may not come back, at least their party, which still holds support from the Sinhala Buddhist majority, would be a key player, the SLPP. SLPP is a major party of the Rajpaksa family, which gets a lot of support from the Sinhala Buddhists, especially the radical Sinhala Buddhists. Now this is where the article raises concern about the Tamil areas, the northern and eastern provinces. Because in northern and eastern provinces, where you find the Tamil minorities to be concentrated, autonomous councils were supposed to provide autonomy to these regions as per the provisions of the 13th Amendment to Sri Lanka's constitution. This amendment was essentially pushed by India. When India worked out the India-Sri Lanka Peace Accord, Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord of 1987 under then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. So Rajiv Gandhi mediated between the Sri Lankan government and the Tamil rebels led by LTTE, and India struck a peace deal between Sri Lanka and the LTTE and the Tamil militants. And to maintain the ceasefire, India even deployed peacekeeping forces, the IPKF, the Indian peacekeeping forces were deployed. So as part of the peace accord, one promise we extracted from Sri Lanka was that northern and eastern provinces would be given autonomy, constitutional autonomy. For example, if you look at the 6th schedule of Indian constitution, there is constitutional autonomy given to autonomous councils in northeast India, in Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram. On similar lines, constitutional autonomy was supposed to be guaranteed to the northern and eastern provinces, where autonomous councils would be set up. There would be elections held to these autonomous councils, these provincial councils, and Tamil parties could look after the administration and governance of these regions. So Sri Lanka, as per the promise made under the peace accord, did implement the 13th Amendment, but it has only been a partial implementation. See, for example, the Tamil language was finally given recognition and equal status along with the Sinhalese language. Autonomous councils were created and some powers were delegated to the provincial councils. But the problem is key subjects like land, police, law and order, they were all retained by the central government itself. Even finance, the ability to raise taxes, key powers like this was retained with the central government, giving only limited executive administrative powers to the provincial councils. So it has been a half-hearted reform that Sri Lanka has introduced, and more importantly, elections have not been held periodically to these provincial elections. For many years, provincial councils have been non-functional. So this undermines the spirit of the 13th Amendment. It betrays the commitment Sri Lanka had made under the India-Sri Lanka Peace Accord. It essentially affects the development and well-being of Tamil minorities in the country, which is a a serious matter of concern for India. So hopefully India will expect that Sri Lanka will restore the provincial councils following the elections which are coming up, right? So next month when presidential elections happen, whichever government is formed, whoever leaders come up, India will hope to build a close relationship with the new government and ensure that the economy is stabilized, right? India is always ready to support Sri Lanka to stabilize its economy, and parallelly we would like to see Sri Lanka implement its commitments, ensure that elections are held to the provincial councils and functional provincial councils are set up so that the autonomy can be truly realized by Tamil minorities in northern and eastern provinces. These are some key issues that we will be watching out for, and of course we would also be looking to resolve the fishermen issue, which has become a major point of concern between India and Sri Lanka. Every now and then Indian fishermen are getting shot, getting arrested as they cross into Sri Lankan waters. So this has become a persistent issue in the relationship. So with the next government, we would like to resolve this as soon as possible. So please take up this practice question based on what we have discussed. I expect you guys to write an answer on this. I'll not discuss the model answer. We have done that for the previous question. So using whatever we have discussed, try to write an answer for this question and please post that in the comment section below. Now let's look at another interesting article on page number 9, a very important article. According to the article, generative AI tools like OpenAI. See, OpenAI is a Microsoft owned AI company, which I'm sure all of you have heard, which has come out with generative AI tools like Chatgpt. So this of course has revolutionized the tech world, and AI and generative AI has become the buzzword. It is already disrupting every sector possible. It is having a huge positive impact on many key sectors, from content creation to the financial markets, right? In every single sector, generative AI is already having a transformative impact. But however, technology, if misused for the wrong purposes, it can be equally dangerous. This has been the case with any transformative technology, be it computers, communication, be it nuclear technology. If it is used for the right purposes, it will have tremendous advantages. At the same time, if it is misused, it can have very deadly consequences for security, for the very civilized society that we all live in. So one such security concern has come up due to the misuse of generative AI. According to recent reports coming from United States, Chatgpt has been apparently used by Iranian covert operatives to carry out influence operations targeting the upcoming American presidential elections. I'm sure all of you have heard that by the end of this year, the US will be conducting its next presidential elections, right? It is a closely watched contest between Trump and Kamala Harris, the candidates from Republican and Democrat Party respectively. So in the upcoming elections, which is tightly contested and it's also divisive on ideological lines, clearly American society, American polity has been split between the more conservative voters, which also includes the far right extremists, and as well as the liberals on the other side. So this is a test of America's ideology as well. The very foundation of the United States is under test in the upcoming elections, as it represents a major split in the American polity between the conservatives and the liberals. In such a key election, it has been noted that American voters are being targeted for influence operations on social media. On social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, etc. AI tools, generative AI tools allegedly have been used by covert operatives linked with Iranian intelligence agencies trying to disrupt the American elections. So this raises a very key issue, a key topic comes up over here, and let's take a detailed look at this. See, OpenAI, which is a Microsoft-backed AI company, it recently informed the public that it had uncovered an Iranian covert operation on its platform, which has been named as Storm 2035. This name has been given by OpenAI itself. Just like every cyber attack, every malware is given a name by cybersecurity firms. Similarly, the AI company itself has given a name called Storm 2035, which refers to this alleged Iranian covert operation. According to the allegation, Iranian covert operatives, most likely working with Iranian intelligence, which is a reference to the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, right, or threat actors who might be sponsored by IRGC, because IRGC may not have been directly involved. They might have used non-state actors, they might have used other cyber groups or such criminal organizations which are threat actors in the cyber domain. See, today elections can be influenced, can be manipulated. The voters, their views, choices and opinions can be influenced by misusing social media. And this is a very important topic under internal security, under GS paper 3. Your social media platforms can be misused easily to manipulate your view, your choice and opinion, right? By understanding the voter pattern, by understanding the choices of the voters, their behavior, and by sending out targeted advertisements and by sending out false information, essentially misinformation, fake news, by carrying out propaganda, you can carry out something called as social engineering. You can engineer the society. You can alter the minds of millions of people, alter their choices without their knowledge. They will think that they are making the decision, but through a subtle campaign, you can push people to change their change their choices or opt for different choices. For example, today it's possible through social media campaigns to push you to go and buy a product which you never wanted in the first place. You can be pushed through the right campaign, through a right propaganda to go and watch a movie that you never wanted to watch in the first place. That is the power of social media. So when it is misused by threat actors, when they rely on fake news, misinformation and carry out propaganda to influence elections, to influence the minds of the voters, that is a threat to the very foundation of a democracy. And this has been happening repeatedly. It's not for the first time. In fact, in the previous two presidential elections as well, in 2016 and 2020, similar allegations were present against Russian threat actors. I'll come to this a little later as well. The FBI went into this allegation that Russian intelligence agencies and cyber threat actors were involved in disrupting the presidential elections to influence the US voters. So this represents a serious concern, and now generative AI is making it even more easy to misuse social media to spread fake news and misinformation. So this alleged operation, which has been uncovered by OpenAI, it has been linked with Iranian covert operatives and threat actors, and it has been named as Storm 2035. So let's quickly understand what exactly they were doing. How are they trying to change the minds of the voters? See, generative AI like Chatgpt can easily generate the content based on your prompts. If you give the right prompts, you can generate easy content, quick content. You can create images, generate text, make memes, right? And you can ensure that this content goes viral on social media. With the right digital marketing campaign, right, you can ensure that such material goes viral on social media. Now, any such threat actor who is looking to influence the minds of the voters, all they have to do is take up key issues, important issues like LGBTQ rights, the Gaza war, Israel, Hamas, Iran issue, which is debated hotly in the United States. So whatever appeals to the American voter, if those issues are exploited, and around that if content is generated, which is basically fake news and misinformation, and if you use that content to push on social media, you're exposing a lot of voters to that false content and misinformation campaign. It's a propaganda campaign. So the more people read about it, the more people are exposed to such content, which is not entirely true, it might influence their choice, it might influence their views, their opinions. Correct? So OpenAI uncovered several websites linked with this Iranian covert operation where content generated through Chatgpt was being used, and most of the content was false or misinformation, and it was part of larger propaganda. They were using sensitive issues from abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, immigration related issues, the anti-immigration trend across Western countries, and the Israel-Gaza conflict. Such sensitive issues were being exploited to generate fake content, and the content would be pushed on social media. on platforms like X, Instagram, where most American voters are present, right? Long form articles, videos, memes, etc. have been pushed, and this helps in influencing the minds of the voters. This is nothing but social engineering. Is that clear? So according to OpenAI, the foreign threat actors linked with Iran, they were using Chatgpt to generate the content, the false content which was pushed on websites and social media, and the idea here was to influence the minds of the voters. So this can have a deadly impact. It can really have a huge impact in influencing the minds of the voters. See, it's very easy today through social media to exploit these issues, sensitive topics, and generate a divisive debate and divide and polarize the voters, which will help in influencing the elections. So according to OpenAI, it has ranked the threat level that was posed by this operation by using the Brookings breakout scale. Please make a note of this. This could be asked in prelims. What is the Brookings breakout scale? This is a scale developed by Brookings Institution, which is a think tank based out of the United States. It has developed a scale to measure the impact of covert operations. Because many countries engage in covert intelligence operations. That is the task of any intelligence agency, to carry out sabotage, to spy on other countries, to destabilize other target countries. These covert operations, which are brought out in the public domain, they are measured for its impact and graded on a scale from 1 to 6. Grade 1 being the lowest risk, grade 6 being the highest risk. Is that clear? So this scale was developed by Brookings Institution, which is a think tank, an American think tank. It's called Brookings breakout scale. On this scale, OpenAI has rated Storm 2035 operation at low end of category 2, which means it was a low risk as far as the threat level was concerned. Because the study by OpenAI has shown that the impact on the voters has been very minimal. The impact of this campaign on social media by using Chatgpt has been very limited, but still it has great potential to disrupt democracy, to derail elections, to manipulate elections from the outside. That is what we need to understand. The risk overall might be less according to OpenAI, which has used the Brookings breakout scale to rate this operation. So Storm 2035, which has been linked with Iranian intelligence, has been rated as category 2, meaning the risk level has been very low. The impact has been very low. But still, it represents a significant threat. Now please note, such similar operations have been uncovered recently by other threat actors. US has seen similar attempts by Russian outfits. OpenAI with American intelligence agencies uncovered a Russian operation as well, which has been named as bad grammar. They were using Chatgpt and generative AI to push such fake content on Telegram by exploiting issues on Ukraine, Moldova, etc. Similarly, a Russian operation called Doppelganger was uncovered. Israeli operation called Zeno was uncovered by OpenAI. A Chinese threat actor was also running a similar cyber campaign by using generative AI tools to easily generate content. It was named as Camouflage. Another Iranian operation, which was named as IUVM, International Union of Virtual Media. These have been some recent covert influence operations run by foreign threat actors targeting the United States. So what they have done, they have used generative AI like Chatgpt to easily create fake news and wrong content and misleading content, and they push this on social media through a targeted campaign. Right? So through this they try to achieve social engineering to manipulate the minds of the voters and to achieve the results they want. This reminds us of alleged Russian interference in the 2016 American elections. See, I've taken this screenshot directly from FBI's website. The FBI went into these allegations, even though it could not entirely prove the allegations. It has indeed filed a charge sheet. It has arrested few Russian operatives who were connected with this operation back in 2016. So here as well, they were using social media primarily like Facebook, TikTok to target American voters and influence the voters to vote for Trump and to develop hatred against the contender Hillary Clinton. The campaign was designed by Russian threat actors working apparently for Russian intelligence agencies like GRU. GRU is a Russian military intelligence agency. It sponsors several cyber groups and threat actors who are involved apparently in this influence operation, where a campaign was run on Facebook and other social media platforms to push the voters to vote for Donald Trump while creating enmity for Hillary Clinton's campaign. The idea was to swing the elections in the favor of one candidate, one party, and this can have very serious security implications. Similar allegations came up in 2020 as well, right? And now we are seeing an Iranian-linked threat actor trying to do something similar by using generative AI and running those campaigns on social media platforms. Now, this is something which should bother and concern any democracy, including India, right? It should be something that really bothers us, because today it has become very easy to manipulate elections, to change public opinion. Tomorrow this can be used to trigger civil unrest, to build popular opinion against the government. As we saw in Bangladesh, it can be easy by using social media to engineer such protests from the outside, which can be a threat to democracy, to elected governments. So this represents a major security risk, and it's important to ensure that such companies are also held accountable. So OpenAI has implemented certain measures to tackle the misuse of its platform. It has created AI products to detect such threat actors and ensure that harmful content is not generated. In fact, already if you look at Chatgpt, it has inbuilt features where it does not generate a response for certain harmful prompts. If you try giving a harmful prompt with a malicious intent, the tool is smart enough, it detects that, and it does not generate a response. Right? There are such safeguards which have been built in, but it's not enough. Fake news and misinformation can still be easily generated. Harmful content might be blocked, but it's very easy to generate fake news and misinformation using generative AI and then push that content on social media to make it go viral. And that can influence the minds of millions of voters. This is where the tech companies have to be held accountable as well. They need to work closely with governments like India. India has to ensure that we have a regulatory policy. We need to force these companies to comply with the regulations. Because there's another risk factor here. Companies like OpenAI, they have close alliance with US government and US intelligence. If you look at all the big tech companies, from Google to Apple to Microsoft, right, they are all closely aligned with American intelligence agencies as well. They work closely with the National Security Agency, the CIA, and the security establishment of the United States. So tomorrow, what if US itself misuses these tech platforms to spy on other countries, to target other countries? That could be a threat to countries like India. If you look at OpenAI, if you look at the board members, many of the members on the board of directors are from US security establishment. There are retired army generals, retired intelligence officers from NSA, CIA, which shows the close links between these companies and the American intelligence agencies. So the US itself could easily misuse these tools to target other countries. So hence, we need to pay attention to the emerging threat, right? It's not even an emerging threat, it has already emerged. It's about how we counter and respond to these threats. Now coming to the next article, on the front page itself, we have an update related to India-Malaysia relations. So Malaysian leader Anwar Ibrahim, the current Prime Minister of Malaysia, is all set for a visit to India. It's a landmark visit, and India is eagerly looking forward to this visit, because this will be in line with our Act East policy. Under Act East, we are trying to build our relations with Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. And Malaysia is a key member of Southeast Asia, and the visit of the Malaysian leader to India is a great opportunity to sign agreements in the economic domain, in the strategic defense domain, and as well as to build people-to-people and cultural relations. So India is eagerly looking forward to this visit. We will have few articles tomorrow and day after, but I'll just give you the context, and we will pick up this topic again in the coming few days. See, India-Malaysia have historically enjoyed very good relations. We have a very strong diaspora community, especially the Tamil diaspora from Tamil Nadu is very strong in Malaysia. A lot of Indians study, work and reside in Malaysia. A lot of Indian tourists visit Malaysia as well. So we have very strong cultural and people-to-people relations. In general, we had very good diplomatic relations and economic ties as well. In fact, we had signed a free trade agreement. India, Malaysia, we have a separate free trade agreement, a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement that was signed few years ago. Even though we have a separate FTA with ASEAN group, ASEAN is a regional group of Southeast Asian countries and Malaysia is a member of it. So we do have a standalone FTA with ASEAN, but separately we have a FTA with Malaysia as well, which highlights the importance of this economic relationship. Malaysia has been a key supplier of palm oil to India. Palm oil finds very big application in the food processing industry and other industries, and Malaysia has been one of the top suppliers of palm oil. There's a lot of trade between the two countries, but unfortunately it has been disrupted, it has been affected due to the political and security related issues. Malaysia has slightly become hostile to India over the last few years. It has sheltered a fugitive, Zakir Naik. Many of you might recognize this individual here. He is a wanted individual in India. He is wanted for promoting hate speech, for spreading radicalism and extremism, for engaging in money laundering, and for being associated even with radical terrorist outfits. So Zakir Naik has been sheltered in Malaysia. India had demanded his extradition. In 2021, PM Modi directly brought up this issue with the then Malaysian Prime Minister. But Malaysia went on to give PR status, permanent residency to Zakir Naik, which allows him to permanently reside in Malaysia. So this is a major friction point. The sheltering and harboring of such fugitives who are wanted in India for creating security issues for India. They are being sheltered in countries like Malaysia. But this is not the only issue. The other issue is diplomatically Malaysia turned hostile to India on issues like Kashmir and internal matters like Citizenship Amendment Act by supporting Pakistan along with Turkey at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and United Nations. See, this is because Malaysia, which is a majority Muslim country, right, internally the politics is such that on Islamic agenda votes can be garnered by the political parties in Malaysia. So religion based or conservative ideology based politics has become stronger in Malaysia, very similar to Turkey that way, right. Malaysia otherwise has no issues with India. Malaysia has never been a threat. It is not actually a hub of any radicalism or terrorism, but the internal politics of Malaysia has become such that votes are largely garnered by the parties based on religious lines, conservative ideological lines. So that's why Malaysia feels the need to be seen as a leader of the Muslim world, backing countries like Pakistan, right, or taking up issues closer to the hearts of the Muslims. So in this political power play, Malaysia ended up becoming hostile to India, even though it has been a good friend. It backed Pakistan over its allegations of human rights violations by India in Kashmir. It supported Pakistan over Citizenship Amendment Act, the protests that occurred against the CAA. It backed Pakistan at OIC and UN when Article 370 was abrogated in Kashmir, right. So these have become major friction points between India and Malaysia. We would like to iron out these issues. In fact, India had retaliated as well. We had suspended and banned palm oil imports from Malaysia. For Malaysia, it was a big source of revenue, but India had banned the import of palm oil from Malaysia as a retaliation for Malaysia's support to Pakistan and because of its hostility it had shown against India. That is one issue we would like to resolve, but there are many agreements which might be signed, and this might be a new phase in India-Malaysia relations. That's why the topic is important under Act East policy, under Southeast Asia. We will continue to track this in the coming classes. Now let's look at the prelim section quickly. We have few small articles. On page 10, we have an article referring to a military exercise called Mitra Shakti. Mitra Shakti is a bilateral military exercise between Indian Army and the Sri Lankan Army. The reason why such topics are important is because in this year's prelims, we got a direct question based on this. I'll show you that question as well. Please note down that this exercise is focused on building cooperation and interoperability between Indian and Sri Lankan forces with regard to counterinsurgency, counter-terrorism as per the UN mandate. Is that clear? And the focus of this edition is using the canine assault units. Today, dogs are used by security forces not just to detect explosives, drugs, etc. They are used in offensive roles. Just like elite commando units, there are tactical canine units which are raised by special forces which can take down terrorists and the enemy. Right? They get involved in actual live operations when counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operations are being carried out. So the focus of this edition of exercise Mitra Shakti is using tactical assault canine units along with the special forces of India and Sri Lanka. Please look at this question which had come this year. This was the question asked by UPSC in 2024 prelims. Please read the question and give me the answer in the comment section. I will not give you the answer here. You read all the 4 statements and give me the right answer in the comment section below. Coming to the next article on page 10, we have this article referring to the Indian Coast Guard. In a very unfortunate development, the Director General, the DG of the Coast Guard, has passed away while he was on duty. In Chennai, he was about to receive the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, and unfortunately Rakesh Pal, the DG of Coast Guard, he collapsed due to a cardiac issue and lost his life. So this is indeed a tragic development for the Indian Coast Guard, which is a key security force of India. So let's quickly understand what is the Coast Guard of India, what does it do? The Coast Guard was established in 1978 through the Coast Guard Act. So it has legal backing, it's a statutory organization set up through an act of the Parliament, and it functions under the Ministry of Defence. It's primarily a maritime security force. It is responsible for safeguarding our maritime security, and it also takes part in many other diverse roles as far as maritime security is concerned. So Coast Guard under the Defence Ministry works closely with the Indian Navy to form a multi-layered maritime defence along the coastline of India. Its primary mandate is to protect India's coastline, oceanic resources, and all the marine resources present in our exclusive economic zone. Is that clear? It has a mandate to assist, rescue mariners who are in distress, meaning it carries out search and rescue operations. Let's say there is an accident involving a commercial cargo ship, and if the mariners are in distress, if they have to be rescued, or if there is, let's say, a tsunami or a cyclone which has caused a disaster, and if people are trapped and people have to be rescued, Coast Guard comes into picture. So it plays the role of a search and rescue force, conducts the SAR operations or search and rescue operations during distress and disasters. It is responsible for safeguarding life and property at sea. It is responsible for protecting India's EEZ, countering any threats. It tackles organized crime, be it piracy, smuggling and trafficking, smuggling of drugs, weapons, human trafficking. Any such organized criminal activity is tackled by the Coast Guard. Even the pushing of fake Indian currency notes. All such illicit activities are tackled, including piracy. Any criminal activity that represents a threat, an economic and security threat to India, is tackled by the Coast Guard. It is responsible for protecting offshore assets. There could be offshore oil rigs, wind turbines, etc. These are offshore facilities of India. Safeguarding them becomes a responsibility of the Coast Guard. Tackling with illegal poaching, right? There could be outsiders who try to poach our marine resources. So enforcing those maritime laws is the responsibility of the Coast Guard. It also plays a role in environment conservation and scientific studies. It has a mandate to protect the sensitive coastal marine environment, and it is the nodal agency to tackle oil spills. Please write this down, because oil spills are very common, very frequent. They keep occurring, and whenever there is an oil spill caused by a shipping accident, the primary role of Coast Guard is to tackle the oil spill. So Coast Guard has that nodal responsibility to tackle and contain oil spills and clean up oil spills, because it is responsible for protecting and preserving the marine environment. It also works with scientific institutions to conduct scientific research. Coast Guard vessels are used for enabling oceanic research, and it acts as the second line of defense, as a backup to the Indian Navy during times of war. When there is a war or a conflict going on, right, Navy will take the lead role, and the Coast Guard will back up the Indian Navy by providing backup support, logistical support, and by also getting directly involved in armed conflict against the enemy. So this is the diverse role of the Coast Guard. Coming to the last article on page 14, we have a reference to a powerful earthquake and a volcanic eruption that has been reported in the Russian Far East. Russian Far East is nothing but the Siberia region. So there can be map-based, geography-based questions that can be asked in prelims. So please look at the map given here. This right here is the Russian Far East. This is the Siberia region of Russia, and India has a lot of stakes, interests over here. See, this region is largely frozen. It's permanently frozen. There is permafrost. The weather climate is inhospitable, extremely low temperatures. The population present here also is very low. But however, Russian Far East is blessed with resources. You have hydrocarbon reserves, precious minerals, and as well as fossil fuel reserves. And there are Indian companies that have invested already. India has promised $1 billion worth investment into the Russian Far East. India is a key investor in this region of Siberia. There are Indian companies like Tata Group and others who are already operating plants and facilities over here. We even have a consulate in the Far East region at Vladivostok. We are planning a maritime link to connect Chennai with Vladivostok to create a shorter sea route between India and Russia. That's why the Siberia region is so important. So here you have the Kamchatka Peninsula. Can you see this extension here? This triangular land extension. This is the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia, present in the Russian Far East. It's found between the Sea of Okhotsk and the Bering Sea. That's where it is located. This peninsula is rich in hydrocarbon reserves. You also have the Sakhalin Peninsula next to it. In the Sakhalin region, India's ONGC Videsh Limited, OVL, it has oil and gas investments in Sakhalin region. So the Kamchatka region is very prone to tectonic activity. It's vulnerable to earthquakes and volcanoes. And a powerful earthquake was reported here. A powerful earthquake was reported on Sunday, a 7 magnitude earthquake, following which a volcanic eruption has been reported. Please note down the name of the site of the volcanic eruption, the Shivluch volcanic eruption. This region in Kamchatka Peninsula of the Russian Far East has witnessed a volcanic eruption, and this is the latest development that you need to note. So be familiar with the geography of the region here. You can also see the Kuril Islands here, right below Kamchatka. This is disputed between a certain country, that is Japan, and Russia. Japan and Russia have a standing maritime dispute, a territorial dispute over Kuril Islands. So please read a little more about the Kuril Island dispute and mention 3-4 important points in the comment section below. That is a small exercise, a small homework for all of you. With this, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session and learned everything that we have studied today. Before we close, you can join my Telegram channel. The link is provided in the description, or you can scan the QR code, and I'll be sharing some updates. And do let me know how the session went through your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next class. Till then, take care. Have a good day.